A good house dress is my favorite outfit. I don't even know how many of these in my collection, but they're so comfortable. I love them. These are the outfits that kept your grandma's bills paid. Welcome back, everyone. We are now at week 9 of the 52 Sunday Dinners project. Here is what we're having this week. We start our meal off with chicken noodle soup, then have some celery. For our main meal, we're having fried chicken a la Hazelton with brown gravy. On the side, we'll have sweet potato fluff and green peas. Then for our salad course, this time we have an olive nut salad with French dressing. And for dessert, we will be trying out floating islands, and as always, there is coffee on the menu. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. My name is Ashley, and I'm a registered dietitian, and I love everything vintage. I'm combining those two things to bring you this project. This is the 52 Sunday Dinners project. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the purpose and mission of this project, you can refer back to week 1, where I give a little bit of a thorough explanation. If you like the sound of what we're making today, why don't you join me in the kitchen and let's see how this turns out. For this chicken noodle soup, I'm not going to make the broth how they suggested. I know we're supposed to be following these recipes. However, I have been experimenting with some bone broth recently, and I have the carcasses of the turkey that Tori made several months ago. I have several just different pieces and parts. I really wanted to have chicken feet for this bone broth, but I couldn't find any. The chicken farmer that I called before, they haven't gotten back to me yet on whether they have chicken feet or not, so that will probably be in the future. However, I bought another chicken. I roasted it yesterday. Right now I'm just gonna pick all of the meat off of the bones, and then all of these carcasses that I have, I'm going to roast them just to kind of elevate the flavor of that bone broth a little bit. And then after all of that is roasted, I'm going to take the roasted carcasses, some organ meats, some vegetables, and I'm going to cook that for probably maybe 18 hours. I'll cook it until tomorrow when we're ready to start the soup again, and that's the recipe we're going to use. Oh yeah, that looks nice and roasty, kind of charred a little bit. I think that will do very nicely in this broth. Yeah, look at that. Perfect. As we've discussed before, I don't know the size of things. My spatial relativity is not very strong, so that might be the size of a hickory nut. Maybe it's too big, maybe it's too small. Either way, I don't know that it matters that much. There really is no emulsifier for this, so I expect we're making it now, but by tomorrow when we go to eat it, we will definitely need to shake it up quite a bit. And the color is okay, but I think it could probably use a little more paprika and make it just a little more red, if it were me. I won't do that because it says to add just a very little paprika, and we added, I don't know what I considered a very little, maybe a little more than a very little, but we'll leave it as is. Based on the serving size of 3 per salad. I'm gonna go ahead and say that hickory nuts are definitely not this big because that is a humongous amount for just one little salad serving. So let's just keep with these two here. I think that is plenty. And we have our French dressing that we made the other day. Just gonna get that mixed back up because it has separated. The dressing smells really good. I feel like we've made this at least once before, but I could be misremembering. Now I know it calls for small sweet potatoes, but we've got a lunker here. We're just gonna go with one big old sweet potato, and that's what we're going to boil. And that's what we're gonna use. We're gonna let this cool down a bit. I just had a neighbor stop by and visit for a little while, which was wonderful, and it gave me a long enough time for this to cool off, and now it's still warm, but it isn't making me burn my fingers. So this is perfect. Just mashing this up a little bit, and I can't remember if I mentioned last week or not. As those of you who have been watching know, I'm having to change some things with what I'm eating and my routine and things. So I also have had to remove dairy from my diet. However, I am talking it over, approved to have just a few bites of things that have dairy in them to try them during these tastings. But then the rest of the week I have to swear off of it. So I'm not going to put any butter in here, and I'm going to use almond milk instead of regular milk. I think it will be just fine in here, and the sugar is in this almond milk. Oh yes, now that I'm saying this, I remember mentioning this last week. So you do, if you've seen last week's video, you already know this. A little salt, a little pepper. My sister taught me this trick, not Tori, my other sister Kayla. If you rub one shaker on top of another, it will make the spices come out faster. So my pepper is coming out significantly better. How many of you already knew about that trick? For the floating islands, we are using regular milk, and I'm cutting the recipe in half. First, because I don't know that this will travel well to give these leftovers to friends or neighbors. Also, because I remember my older sister making this when she was in high school, I think for a French project or something, and I remember them being awful. My memory could be wrong. Maybe they were delicious and I'm remembering something else. Maybe she made something different that wasn't this. Maybe it was just the recipe that she used, but I remember very, very deeply not liking them. And so in addition to the fact that I don't want to waste food, I also remember not liking them. So that's why we are cutting this in half today. Flavor, I think a vanilla and an almond will be good. Lemon also seems like it'd be pretty good, but I think for this one I'm going with the almond and the vanilla. We're starting to thicken up a little bit. All right, let's see how these turn out. I'm going to kind of dump this mixture into the middle of this little pile of flour and then add more as needed. I don't know if that's the correct way to do this, but that's the way we're gonna do it. Ah, it's escaping. This isn't, oh no. Okay. There we go. Not coming together, so I might have to maybe double the recipe and do another egg in there. Hold please, we'll be right back. Maybe this will help. Alright, so I understand we don't really need to knead this because we're not developing any gluten, but we do need it to be at least a decent texture before we roll it out. And we need the flour to absorb all of the moisture in here. Alright, I think this feels okay. It looks okay. So I'm gonna let it rest for just a couple minutes and then we'll roll it out. I really like the visual comparisons that they're giving. So roll this up like sheet music. And I assume that's like this. And then cut it into threads or shreds like coleslaw. I don't really know what it means to do that, but I guess we're just gonna try it out. Cut it some sort of way and maybe it'll be like coleslaw. I'm just gonna cut it into regular noodles and then just kind of shred it from there into the pot, maybe. Some of it's kind of already shredding a little bit on its own, so I guess that saves us a little bit. Here's my little roll. Here's my little, kind of looks like little baby fettuccine or something. I guess we'll just kind of shred it. Doesn't really look like coleslaw to me, but that's okay. Well, that's a good method. Just kind of Now there is a lot of liquid left over with the chicken here. All right, you know we are at my favorite part of the evening, the tasting part, and we're kicking this meal off with another soup, and we're doing chicken noodle soup for this one. Now, the only real, I think, criticism I have, or maybe misunderstanding from my point of view, is that we're having a chicken noodle soup the same day that we're having chicken. And they want us to make the chicken noodle soup, the broth for the soup, the day before we make the chicken. To me, this doesn't make sense. I would think, or if it were me, I would have the chicken today, and then tomorrow or the next day, I would take the bones and the carcass of that chicken that we had today and use that to make chicken noodle soup later. So maybe chicken noodle soup would be on the menu for either next Sunday's dinner or a big meaty portion of this. Like it would have the noodles and the broth, but it would also have the leftover pieces of chicken, the meat of the chicken, and several vegetables in here to make an entire meal so that you would have just the soup, probably, at least for me, for the meal, and it would be a very well-balanced, well-rounded meal in itself. So unless they just happen to have, like I did happen to have, leftover carcasses, and I did go out and buy a few more pieces of chicken to add in, and actually turkey as well, but it just doesn't make sense to me. But again, I'm looking at this through the lens of 100 years later, so maybe it makes sense for them. But let's give this chicken noodle soup a try. We have our noodles in here and they look nice and shredded up. You can see a little bit closer. I think I probably have way more noodles than probably what it was supposed to have in there, particularly for the amount of broth that I included. I did double the noodle recipe because I didn't get the texture right the first time. So I probably have double to triple the amount of noodles in here. However, if we're trying to make this meal stretch and fill people up right off the bat, this would be a good way to do it. It smells very good. It smells homemade in a good way. Ooh, that is delicious. These noodles are really good. The flavor of this broth, I did an amazing job. This is my first time at chicken bone broth, and I didn't have everything I wanted for it. I really wanted feet, and I didn't have the chicken feet for it, but if I do say so myself, I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back. Yeah, this is great. You should be thoroughly, I know you can't taste this, but if you could taste this right now, you would be thoroughly impressed by me. Yeah, that is good. Now, the noodles are a little on the maybe slimier side because we use that gluten-free flour. It has a little bit of a different texture. I love the way this feels, the flavor, the texture of it. I think it's phenomenal. If you don't like that almost kind of, yeah, I guess it would be a little bit, the only way I can describe it is slimy, maybe slippery, maybe less slimy, more slippery. If you don't like that, this might be a little bit too much for you, but if you do like it, I feel like I've said this a couple times, I think already, but I kind of just want to add a little bit of the chicken and some carrots, onions, celery, turnips, maybe other vegetables to this. And I want this to just be the meal. I don't want to bother with the rest of it because my mouth is watering now as I'm talking about it. This is really good. This is just comfort in a bowl right here. This is great. All right. We need to stop because if I keep going, I'm going to fill myself up and I'm not going to be able to give an honest opinion on anything else because I'll be too full. So we're going to stop after a couple bites there. Maybe we'll go back to that one later, but let's try our main meal. We should have celery next, but I'm going to go ahead and skip over it this time just because, again, so many different things to try and I don't want to fill myself up with something that we've kind of had before. And I think I know what celery tastes like. I can imagine what it would be like to insert it now, kind of have that palate cleansing refresher, kind of crunchy right in the middle here, and then going back into this. So we're going to skip that and we're going to go in for the chicken. Now, I found it interesting that we should have gravy over top of this chicken because it was really very kind of wet and moist on its own. a little bit for me, and maybe I'll change my mind once I taste it. I'm keeping that in mind. But it was a little disappointing when I saw fried chicken. I got excited because there is nothing better than fried chicken. And then we get to it and it is fried, but then it's simmered in water for a while. And I love that crispy, crunchy skin of a fried chicken. So, you know, there's a little bit of disappointment initially for me on this. But let's give it a taste and see if that is kind of overridden by the flavor of it. And I'm trying a leg. That's what I made. It has a very nice chickeny smell. It smells kind of foul. Get it? Yeah, this chicken recipe I would say is just okay for me. While I do like that kind of mushy texture to things, kind of the moist, squishy kind of, it just isn't working for this chicken for me. I really want it to be crispier, crunchier, better, and it just isn't. I think maybe if we did things a little bit, adjusted some things with this, maybe if I had added or subtracted, maybe added a little bit more salt or something, but yeah, overall this, I would say, is just a little bit of a disappointment, the chicken for me. I really want it to be crispy. Let's try the peas. The peas are great. They taste just like peas, or at least they taste just like frozen peas to me. I love them. I do wonder, would these peas have been in season at this time? I know probably not here, definitely not here where I'm at. And maybe they would have been in storage. But if they were in storage, why would we have been using the canned peas the last few recipes? But my mind is kind of whirling on why fresh peas for this recipe, but not the last couple weeks that we've had cream of pea soup and creamed peas. Just a interesting kind of observation, I think. And let's try the sweet potato fluff. Again, these vegetable recipes are very simple in flavor. So the sweet potatoes smell and taste like a sweet potato. It's not, while it's not seasoned very much, I feel like that's okay with these vegetables because it really brings the flavor of that vegetable forward. Same thing with the peas. You're really tasting the vegetable more than anything else, and they're enhanced with a little bit of salt. I didn't add butter to either of these for myself, but if I had, I think they would be enhanced by just a little bit of butter and salt. Overall, it's a nice vegetable flavor, and what I like about this plate in particular is the colors. We have the orange, we have the green. I think that looks very nice on the plate with this brown chicken, the brown gravy. I really like that. Let's try a salad course. Here is another very interesting salad to me. Not something I would think of as a salad. Cream cheese and olives with walnuts on lettuce, but there you have it. The smell, not that I guess at a normal dinner you wouldn't be picking the whole plate up and smelling it unless you knew somebody that you were eating with very well and they wouldn't find that odd. Or they're used to your weirdness. I thought overwhelmingly I would smell the French dressing, maybe the vinegar and oil, but I am smelling, I mean, you can smell the iceberg lettuce. You can kind of smell that freshness, crispness to it. I can also smell the walnuts in there. So it's just a little bit different than what I would expect to smell immediately. We're gonna try this all together at once. Get a little bit of the dressing, a little bit of the lettuce, and a little bit of this cheese. That's interesting. It's very different. It's not unpleasant, but there's a heaviness to it. Like maybe the dressing needs a little more vinegar or lemon or something to brighten it. There's not quite enough vinegar for the oil, I think, to cut through. You have the cream cheese is, not oily, it's fatty and kind of heavy, and your olives as well. Your olives are very rich in fat and heavy as well. And then your walnuts, same thing, very rich in fat and kind of heavy. There's not enough brightness to cut through all of that heavy, fatty oil. The flavor isn't bad, it's just unbalanced, and when you're chewing through it, I like the crunch of the walnuts, but the lettuce, maybe we're not supposed to eat the lettuce with this. I know we've talked about this before, really lettuce is for the presentation, but when I see something called a salad and I see lettuce on the plate, I want to eat the lettuce. And especially having the French dressing on there, if there's dressing on there, we should eat the lettuce, because this little ball is not a salad in my mind. Chewing through the lettuce while also chewing through this cheese ball, there's just something off about it. Like you're chewing through it, through the cheese, and then you get this like whole piece of the lettuce kind of around it. This is hard to describe without sounding like a crazy person. It just, to me, it doesn't work. And maybe if I just didn't have any, if you didn't eat the lettuce, maybe it would be fine. But with the lettuce, there's just something off here. Anybody else? Do you remember your parents or grandparents making these or eating this? Do you still make it and eat it? And do you have similar experiences, or am I eating it wrong? No. Last but not least, we have our dessert course. And here we have our floating islands, and I'm kind of thinking it looks a little bit like I have too many islands for my little ocean that it's floating in here. But maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know. This is not what I remember the floating islands that my sister made looking like. So I'm hoping they're going to be a little bit tastier than what I remember. They smell good. I can smell the almond in it more than I can smell anything else. As I'm kind of cutting through that egg white there, it does feel kind of not crisp, but there is a definite texture weight to it. I had to really press through a little harder than I would expect. It had kind of like a snap when I broke it. So there's either like a skin on the outside, or it is not as, I guess, just smooth to break through as I had expected it to be. There's more texture and firmness to it. And the bottom definitely looks like a custard or a pudding. So yep, that almond is coming through more than anything else. Okay. I take it back. These are actually rather tasty. It's not overwhelmingly sweet. I like the almond in here. I think the almond really works with that vanilla and makes it, I don't know, it complements itself very well. The egg whites on the top, you kind of break through as you get to the custard, and the texture is very nice. It's like a little fluffy and foamy at first and then breaks into smooth. It just transitions very well. The bite of it transitions very well, and it's like the opposite flavor-wise. So as the texture is transitioning from the fluffy, foamy egg white down into the creamy custard, the flavor is going the opposite way. You're initially getting that vanilla custard, almond custard flavor, and then moving up into a little bit lighter. The egg white really doesn't have much flavor at all, but it's kind of, I really like that opposite reaction to it. That's very, very nice. I definitely take back what I said earlier about really not liking floating islands and thinking they were really terrible and unpleasant, because, oh, this is lovely. I think this would also make a really nice individual portion. And I don't know if we were supposed to serve these individually. It said in a glass dish, but I think this would work very nicely in a little parfait glass or a little wine glass or something to serve individual. And you have just maybe one or two little floating islands on top of the custard underneath. I think that would be a really great dessert to serve at a party, or even a little buffet. If you had little individual shots of desserts, this would be a great and inexpensive option to try out. Overall, I think while this menu wasn't bad, it hasn't been my favorite. At least some of the individual parts of it are not my favorite. And I've been really enjoying some of the meals that we've had prior to this. And so while I wouldn't rate this one as unlikable, I think if I was doing a scale of 1 to 10, I might rate this one maybe a 6.5, maybe a 7. So nothing was really terrible, but I think we've just had a lot better before this menu. I didn't understand, or I still don't understand, the chicken noodle soup and the chicken as the main meal. And just the salad didn't work for me. Some of these things went together well, some of them not so much. So yeah, I'm gonna stick firmly in that 6.5 to a 7. Nutrition-wise, I would rate this higher nutrition-wise than I would overall cohesiveness of this meal. I like that we had several different types of vegetables here. We had some non-starchy vegetables in our lettuce and in our celery. Then we had the potatoes and the peas for our starchier vegetables. Different colors, some of them raw, some of them cooked. I like that variety. Our chicken, if we had we fried it with the skin on, so I guess calling it a lean protein is probably not accurate, but I think that it is a great protein option and choice. Well, I would have liked to see a little bit of fruit in this menu if we're looking at it as an overall balance. I can't say that in my normal dinners or most people's normal dinners that they do fruit as well as vegetables at dinner time. And so especially at this time of year, if they're eating their fruits at other portions of other parts of the day and other parts of the week, you have to give it to them there. So overall, I'd say maybe for a nutrition standpoint, maybe an 8 on this one. And budget-wise, this one might be one of our least expensive meals yet. I think looking over everything estimated for 6 people, this meal might have cost about $35. And I think the most expensive thing outside of a whole chicken is probably the cream cheese and the walnuts. Everything else is relatively pretty inexpensive overall. I think we can chalk this meal up to another win. We did a fabulous job on the soup broth. We did, I think, a redemption of the floating islands, in my opinion. If you like what you saw today, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel so that you never miss another dinner. Join us next week where we have steak with oyster sauce and pineapple delight. Bye. Any other food stories you want to share? Or memories?
Well, I think one of the interesting food stories is that when I was growing up, and it was a time when girls were not interested in being educated, but I had made up my mind I was going to go to college. I was, that was all I was interested in. And you couldn't get me near a kitchen. And I remember my dad saying to my mother, "You've got a teacher." I wouldn't go near the kitchen. So anyway, I did graduate, and I worked in my own field. And
college. You graduated college.
I graduated college, yes. Mm-hmm. And I said, yes, even the professor told me at that time to go back to the kitchen where I belonged, which I felt I did not belong in the kitchen. But so after some years, I was engaged, and I was going to get married. So I decided maybe I should try and cook a meal for my fiance. So my parents had gone to Florida, and I was going to cook this meal, and my aunt calls up, and she's frantic. He'll never marry you. Don't cook. I'll cook the meal for you. Don't cook a meal for him because he'll never marry you. And he did marry me, and my field was science. I was doing cancer research. And what's the difference between working in a laboratory and following a procedure and making sure that you were accurately putting all of these chemicals together and cooking? It's following a recipe. Well, lo and behold, I became obsessed with cooking. I became so obsessed with cooking that I just cooked too much. And people would go to my husband and say, "Would you please put her under control where food is controlled?" The wise man that he was, he said, "I don't go there." And so, anyway, and I think I'm a pretty good cook. What do you think?
What do you think I think?
Well, I taught you. Is that correct?
You did teach me. Yes. Yeah, I'd say you were a fantastic cook.
I like to experiment with all new dishes and things, but I'll tell you, my family was not happy. Even after I was married, the first year, we were in a small apartment, and I decided to invite everybody for Thanksgiving and cook a Thanksgiving dinner. And then I decided to start my own tradition, onion soup. We always had to have French onion soup at Thanksgiving dinner. And I'm happy to say that my granddaughters, they're carrying on that tradition. But my mother had never heard of French onion soup. She says, "Well, I'm going to bring my own soup." She used to beg me to make French onion soup for her after she tasted it because she loved it. But anyway, they were making more excuses that I shouldn't be doing it, don't do this. But you know what? In retrospect, it was the last family meal I had with my father. After that, he went into the hospital. He was in the hospital for Christmas and then died a few months later. So I'm very happy that at least one time I could cook a full meal, a fancy meal.
Yeah.
For my family, including my father.
Yeah. I think that's good encouragement for anybody out there that is unsure about whether they should do something. Just go for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Even with all the discouragement. But I am a stubborn person, I will admit to being a stubborn person. When my mind is made up for something, yes, forward we go.
True.
And you can't change my mind.
No, that is for sure.